Orchestration can be so overwhelming, can totally just make you feel like you're terrible at what you're doing. You hear these big, huge chords in all these movies, and then you sit down and you make something and it sounds nothing like that. Well, I'm going to break that down and I'm going to show you just how easy it is to actually replicate that sound. And I'm going to show you in different layers of complexity how to make something like this. I find the simplest way to break down something like this is to reverse engineer. So, break it down by chords. What's going on here? There's only 2 chords that are being played. To start, we're simply playing a B flat. That's it. Now from here, we're going to move up to a D flat major. So we're going major to major. And that's it. So how do you get from that to what we just heard? First thing you have to decide is, what part of this chord do you want to hear? Do you want to emphasize the root, just that? Do you want to emphasize maybe the third? Or you could emphasize the fifth. How you build this chord is going to change slightly how it sounds. But ultimately, it's the same formula you can do. Obviously, there are infinite examples of how you can do this, but I'm going to show you just one of them that seems to work every single time. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to build the base of the entire thing. You have to remember when you're doing this that your bass cannot be doing something complicated. You're just playing the root the whole way through. So here we have our basses playing that B flat and then that D flat. Another thing to keep in mind is what direction you go with that change can drastically change how this sounds. Now if you look, it's actually a shorter move if I were to go up to that D flat, but going down is going to create a bigger shift and a bigger pull in that sound that you're hearing. So you can take that and play around with it and see which one works best. But in this scenario, we're going to go down. We're going to go for the bigger pull. As we continue to build the foundation of this chord, we're going to go with the tuba. Tuba is going to play that exact same thing. Now here's where things start to get a little complicated. Now, if you are using a sample library that does not have individual solo instruments, this isn't going to sound as good, and this could be part of the reason that you can't replicate the sound. For this example, I'm using Berlin brass, so we have individual patches for each trombone. This is the first instance of where I'm going to use something other than the root of this chord. So I have my bass trombone on the bottom, and then I have a trombone playing an octave above that, and then I have my third trombone playing the third of the chord. First I'm going to solo it without that third. I'm just going to move it and I'm going to double it up on the root. And now this is what it sounds like with just root notes. Now let's move it up to the fifth and see what that sounds like. So the fifth can give you some really big, wide open sounds, but I want that third in there. I want to hear that. So I'm having this trombone play the third. You can hear in this instance, it sounds a little muddy, right? So you could argue that maybe it would work better if it didn't play the third and I saved it for other instruments. That's something that you have to be consciously aware of. You have to keep moving things around to see where it fits best. Next, we have 4 French horns. They're going to play the full triad of that chord, the root, third, fifth, and then they're going to play an octave on top. Now here's something super important. We have 3 trumpets, right? We're going to play that triad again, but you want to take the top trumpet and have it play the root of the chord. So it's playing an inversion. So that top note is our B flat, and then the 3rd and the 5th are underneath it. And then when you put all this stuff together that we've heard so far. All right, now what do we do with the rest of the strings, and why did I skip the cello? The reason I skipped the cello is because in this instance I have it playing a counter melody. However, if we weren't going to have a counter melody, I would take that cello and I would just double it an octave above the basses. So what do you do with the rest of the strings? Well, all 3 of them are playing the 3rd. A lot of people are going to tell you, you shouldn't double the 3rd a lot, which is very, very good advice. But in this particular instance, that's what we're trying to do. When I was trying to decide, are the strings just playing the root? What are they playing? Well, the melody that comes in comes off of that 3rd, and that's why ultimately I decided to lean into the 3rd of this chord a lot. So let's see what it would sound like if we weren't doing the 3rd. Let's put it all on the root note. So as you can hear, that sounds arguably better. This is more how you'll typically see a big chord like this. But, like I said, the melody that I'm about to show you is why I made the decision that I made. Here's with everything playing off of that root note. And here's off of the 3rd. So that's how powerful choosing which note you're playing within a chord can completely change the sound, the tone, and the feeling of what you're hearing. It's all the same chord. All of it's the same chord. You play it on the piano, it looks the same basically every single time. But when you take it and you arrange it in a certain way and have different instruments, different colors, playing and pushing out on different parts, completely changes your sound. Okay, so now we come to that melody that I was talking about. So the melody just walks up the scale. Even though we're borrowing a chord in this, this is in D minor. So it starts on D. That's the melody. So if I put the chords on there. And that's where you hear that it leans, that half step wants to pull you back down. So that's the melody. And being that it starts on a D, that's the 3rd of our B flat. Now I'm going to show you how it sounds with just the strings. So there is a counter melody that breaks off halfway through the climb on this part. And that's why I haven't shown you the cello section yet, because that's where that happens. So you'll see right here the cello comes down. Now you'll notice that the voicing on that second chord is a bit different in the string. This was a decision I made simply to make it a little more chaotic. So you can see this purple here is the viola, the green is the second violins. So they switch to root and 3rd, and then way up top the violin plays on the 5th, and then it pulls back down and slowly works its way back into D minor. The brass have a similar movement to what the cello does. It follows going up on that melody, and then it all switches to that counter melody. One thing to be aware of is when notes start and stop. So if you look around here, these are my horns. They're being covered up by these other instruments, but these are the horns. They stop after one measure because they're switching to that melody. So if you have different patches for short and long articulations, make sure that those aren't overlapping. Otherwise, it's going to sound unrealistic. If you look at this little trumpet section here, there's something a little interesting going on. I'm walking up, but the top trumpet is following that same rhythm of notes, but it's just playing the root the whole time. A lot of times when you have a melody that's moving like this and it's kind of more rhythmic, if you take one of those instruments in that ensemble and have it do the same thing but just stay on the root, it can add a ton of stability. And then lastly, I just have this little flute run that plays on the top of it. Now in terms of percussion, this can add a ton to the sound. All I have is a cymbal, tubular bells, and a timpani. So the timpani is going to do a roll right into that first big hit. And then I almost forgot the last part, the triangle. I do technically have two other tracks playing in here, which are these ambient textures that are just layering everything. That's specific to the project I was working on, not something I would generally tell you to do. But if you were wondering, it's this. And here's everything all together. And that's it. That's the secret. So go ahead, test it out, see if it works for you. Come back, let me know what you think. Is this something that helps? Does this make it a little easier to understand, or is it still really confusing?